Hello and welcome to the Cricket Podcast here at overthelinesports.com.au. I'm Dan Beswick and today I'm joined by Luke Ward. Luke, how are you today, buddy?
Doing very well, Bez. How about yourself?
Not too bad. There's plenty of cricket set to kick off this summer. Of course, Australia did very well in the one-day international series against South Africa, winning that series by 4-1. How do you see the first test playing out?
It's going to be a very interesting one. I think it'll be quite a contest, and hopefully Australia can come out with a win.
We'll get back to that a little bit later, but first, a really, really sad story, and it's one that's been all over, has done the rounds on social media and mainstream media as well, getting on board in the support for Phillip Hughes. Of course, Phillip Hughes currently in hospital after being struck by a bouncer by Sean Abbott in South Australia's Sheffield Shield game against New South Wales at the SCG yesterday. That match has actually been abandoned now. Hughes collapsed and fell on his face before the New South Wales players raced to help him. Hughes was then reportedly given CPR before being airlifted to St Vincent's Hospital in a serious condition. He's currently in an induced coma, and Luke, it's really a terrible situation for everyone involved in this situation. Obviously, Hughes first and foremost, as well as his friends and family. You saw the incident. It's really a terrible situation, isn't it?
Yeah, horrible situation, Bez, and really just a freak accident. I mean, this could really happen to anyone on the cricket field, and there's just unfortunate, really. I mean, he was looking good for this week's cricket squad, really, and now he's probably got a long recovery ahead of him.
Of course, he was unbeaten on 63 at the time, so he would have been seeing the ball quite well. And Sean Abbott, the man who delivered the ball, must be feeling quite bad at the moment. We also have to extend our thoughts for him as well, currently going through a pretty tough time of it. We don't like to speculate things, especially in regards to an incident like this. So whenever we get more news in regards to this, we'll forward it to everyone that likes and follows us at Over the Line Sports. So make sure to stay tuned, and hopefully we wish him all the best in his recovery. Going forward for the first test, we know that Michael Clarke is out injured due to his hamstring injury. No real surprise, of course. He couldn't quite overcome yet another injury. It's been 3 matches for the Australian captain. On the face of the situation, it doesn't look too good for Clarke in Cricket Australia. A few rumours going around that Clarke's unhappy with the setup, but we do know that the situation has left the two not seeing eye to eye. We'll start with, of course, the situation going on in grade cricket, where the match was pretty much contrived in between West and Parramatta. What was your take on that situation, firstly?
Yeah, really interesting. Not really a great situation, and not really a great idea in general to talk to the other captain and tell him you want to bowl first, so you can let the the captain of Australian cricket come back to bat. I mean, obviously they wanted to win the game, and they sent the team in and tried to get some runs on the board. Just an interesting thing, and I hope Clarke wasn't involved in the trying to get himself a bat, because I don't think that really shines a good light on him.
No, I don't think he did. From what I read into, Jeff Cook, who was the West captain, thought he would take it upon himself. And looking at the scorecard, it's a messy one where they declared on none for 17. Parramatta declared at something like 2 for 135, and then just let West bat for the rest of the day. And the plan was for Clarke to come in at the start of day 2, which is this weekend, to have some batting practice before the game started, though we know now it's probably not going to eventuate at all. Clarke was also selected to play in the Cricket Australia 11's clash against the Indian touring squad today, though he never did that either. There's going to be plenty of fallout from this situation, and another thing that we won't hear the end of anytime soon. Another hole that Clarke leaves is at captain. Brad Haddin is the favourite to take the captaincy for the first test, though a lot of people throwing Steve Smith's name into the hat as well as Shane Watson's. Luke, do you think Brad Haddin is the right choice for this test match?
Yeah, I think Haddin's probably the obvious choice at this stage. I mean, I think Smith might be the best choice going forward, but Haddin seems to have the inner track on the job at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. You've got to pick your captain based on the situation today at present. I think Haddin is probably the right man to take over the job. The only problem with Haddin at the moment is currently his injury that he's nursing as well, though it looks as though he'll be fit for play. Going forward, I agree that Steve Smith is the long-term option. Guys like Watson, Rogers, and Haddon won't be there in the next 3 to 4 years, and Steve Smith will definitely be a key figure of Australian cricket. So I do think Steve Smith is the eventual man to take the reins. And that's a pretty big deal for someone like Steve Smith. He's had a wonderful year and he's shown that he can really produce it when it matters in Test cricket and in the other forms of the game. Do you think that the pressure of captaincy will hinder a man like Smith, or does he seem like a pretty free spirit that will do pretty well regardless?
I don't think it'll hinder him too much. I mean, it hinders everyone at stages. I mean, every captain has gone through stages where they've lost a couple of games and their own form falls off. It's just a natural occurrence. But Smith seems like a pretty easygoing bloke who is aggressive, and that's, I think, an important thing in a captain. And I think it's helps to sort of overcome that difficulty as well.
That's been one positive of Clarke, his aggressiveness as a captain. He is known for declaring early and sort of giving the opposition a sniff at victory. The obvious example is that 329 not out where he declared on himself unbeaten in that Sydney Test, fittingly against India, which we'll look at pretty soon. Again, Steve Smith is kind of a free spirit with the bat, which makes me think that he doesn't feel too much pressure on his shoulders when he goes out and bats. So I think the captaincy might be not so much of a burden on him. But going back to this first test, we know that, again, with Clarke out, we need to replace the batsman. Hughes, due to his circumstances yesterday, is out of contention. Shaun Marsh scored 100 in Sheffield Shield yesterday, and him, Callum Ferguson, are probably the two front runners for the spot. Even Alex Doolan and Usman Khawaja can provide a case. Who do you think will get the nod?
I think at this stage, it's probably looking like Shaun Marsh. I mean, Ferguson is also in good nick, as well as Nick Maddinson, also a young bloke that has batted well. And then you got a few wicket keepers in sort of Matthew Wade and Chris Hartley, who probably could almost fit into this side as a batsman at the moment.
Yeah, also Sam Whiteman is quite capable with the bat. There's a lot of fantastic keepers going around. Even a guy like Matt Wade isn't a set-in-stone second keeper for Australia at the moment.
Yeah.
Plenty of talent going around. I think if you asked me yesterday who would have been picked, I would have said someone like Ferguson. But now, after news of Marsh's 100, you'd probably edge him slightly. And that's a pretty special story in itself, given that he will be playing alongside his brother Mitch. Of course, 12 years ago was the last time we saw siblings playing Test cricket together for Australia in Steve and Mark Waugh. That'll be a pretty special moment in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're both very good cricketers who have, well, in Shaun Marsh's case, has the experience at this level and should hopefully do well.
Yeah, and it's quite an interesting situation at Western Australia in terms of batting, because a few seasons ago they really struggled to compile totals both in the one-day domestic competition as well as the Sheffield Shield. Guys like Marcus North really helped them push along, but now Shaun and Mitchell Marsh are really producing good totals for WA out there in the West. Now, from the batting, we'll look at the bowling side of things. Of course, Josh Hazlewood has been picked in the Test squad as long as Ryan Harris, who is coming back from injury. Out of Harris and Hazlewood, assuming we pick a spinner in Nathan Lyon, who do you think gets the nod, Luke?
I think for the first test at this stage, it's got to be Hazlewood. Harris is sort of coming back from a couple of injuries, and it's been really tough, and he hasn't got a lot of games. So I think Hazlewood, who's in the form of his life at the moment, probably deserves the chance at his first test cap.
Yeah, and the fact that they could go with a four-man pace attack isn't that ridiculous either. A man like Lyon will probably be unlucky to be omitted from the squad, but the Gabba is a good wicket, I guess, for the paceman. There's a chance that both get picked anyway, but I'd probably take Hazlewood based on his form, both in the Matador Cup and for Australia in the one-day series against South Australia. Took plenty of wickets in the Matador Cup, especially at grounds such as North Sydney, which are very batsman-friendly, are very small outfields, a lot of big totals scored. So to get some good figures there in the one-day domestic competition, I think is not something to laugh about. And to be honest, I think Hazlewood was probably one of our more impressive quicks during that one-day series. Of course, Coulter went down injured, though he wasn't particularly impressive. Neither was Mitchell Starc, actually. And you have to say that out of those three plus Harris, you have to go with Hazlewood in this situation. Though we don't really know how fit Harris is, And Harris has been performing notably well in the Sheffield Shield to start off this season, coming back from injury. Though I do agree, I think you've got to pick Hazelwood. Of course, Johnson and Siddle are the other two quicks that will get the nod unless something unforeseen happens. So, with that in mind, what do you think the batting order will look like?
Well, it's a pretty tough question, but I think at this stage it's pretty set in stone. I couldn't see a lot of changes happening, but I think we've got Rogers and Warner opening the batting. Obviously, it's a pretty good pair. They've been together for a while now, so I think that's got to continue. And I got Watson at 3. I think that could be the one that moves around a bit. Maybe Watson, and then I've got Marsh at 4. Oh, sorry, it's Shaw Marsh at 4. Steve Smith at 5. Mitch Marsh at 6. Brad Haddon at 7. Johnson, Siddle, Harris, and Lyon at the moment. Oh, Hazelwood and Lyon, sorry.
Yeah, I think it won't be too much different to that. If anything, if Sean Marsh is picked, he might bat at 3. He's done that in the past. But again, one thing that the Australian team needs in the test setup is consistency in the batting order. For too long, it's fluctuated. And going back to the bygone era, we do need some consistency in terms of the batting order. You look at that golden period, you had Ponting 3, Martin 4, Steve Waugh 5. You always had Gilchrist at 7. Hayden and Langer opening the batting. Very, very consistent setup in terms of the bat. And I think that's something we really, really need going forward to gain and garner any form of consistency with the bat. That lower order shouldn't change too much. Johnson's a very capable batsman at 8. A lot of people would even argue that he could even bat at 7 in most test sides around the world. Siddle's no slouch with the bat either. A guy like Lyon can hang around as well as Harris. So looking at that, I think that that's the lineup we're going to probably see come next week. And in terms of the Indian side now, if we look towards them, just going through their squad, of course, MS Dhoni is injured and will be out of the first test, Virat Kohli being the appointed captain. Also, it's important to note that they've picked 2 backup keepers in Ridham and Saha and Naman Oja. Saha scored an unbeaten 50 today in their match against the Cricket Australia 11. The rest of the squad is Shikha Dhawan, Murali Vijay, Khalil Rahul, Cheteshwar Pujara, Ajinkya Rahane, Rohit Sharma, of course, Suresh Raina, Ravi Ashwin, Khan Sharma, Ravindra Jadeja, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Mohammad Shami, Ishant Sharma, Umesh Yadav, and Varun Aaron. Much younger test team than the one that toured last time. Of course, Laxman and Tendulkar were out here. A lot of the talk, of course, in their last tour was Tendulkar looking for his 100th 100. He didn't get it in Australia, of course. VVS Laxman and guys like Harbhajan Singh were also here. VVS Laxman looked very, very sluggish in the field, very off the pace, very lazy, and did not perform with the bat. You've got to say, younger side this time, they've got to go better than the last tour they had down here.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pretty much guaranteed that they do better. They will miss Dhoni in the first test, but a lot better side, a lot more well-rounded side that's probably a better fielding side as well, which is very important in Test cricket.
Yeah, agreed. They were very, very sluggish in the field. Just talking about Laxman before, they dropped quite a few catches and they let guys like Michael Clarke score a mountain of runs. I mean, I was at that Sydney Test where he scored that triple century. Actually, the day he went from about 46 to 251 in a day. 205 runs by himself in a day of Test cricket. Shows that the bowling and fielding was not up to par that day. I remember guys like Ishant Sharma getting hit around. Umesh Yadav was probably the pick of the bowlers back then, actually. Again, I think Dhoni's absence at captain might be a blessing in disguise for India. I think I'd like to see Kohli as a captain. I think he'd be a little bit more aggressive than Dhoni. I do question some of Dhoni's tactics with the captaincy. Dhoni is someone like a Graham Smith as a test captain where I just think they're a little bit too defensive too early, and I think they really need to sort of harness a more attacking field at times. We might keep saying that about Graham Smith forever now that he's retired. You have to say they have to do better than the last tour, and really Kohli's probably the key for them.
I think definitely Kohli is the key, along with probably Rohit Sharma as well. I mean, they're both explosive run scorers who really are some of the best in the game, and I think they will be relied on to score a lot of India's runs, especially with Dhoni out. And they're also very aggressive, a lot better fielding than a lot of the other players in that team, and they'll probably lead them.
Of course, Rohit Sharma scored that 264 in the one-day international against Sri Lanka not so long ago. An absolutely ridiculous feat to think that someone could amass almost a pretty good one-day international total by themselves in that game. He actually scored more runs than the entire Sri Lankan squad. So it's an unbelievable achievement, and one I don't think we're going to see eclipsed anytime soon. To think that anyone would even score 200 alone in a one-day international was ridiculous to think about even 10 years ago when guys like Syed Anwar and Adam Gilchrist and Mark Waugh gave it a crack. But just an unbelievable amount of runs scored by just one figure alone. To make a prediction in terms of the Test series over 4 tests, I think Australia are going to be too strong on home soil. We know for a fact that it's no secret that home teams do well better than the tourists in terms of Test cricket. I think you can look back to the last 2 seasons of Test cricket and you can't find too many instances where the away team actually wins a Test. I'd probably say Australia 3-0. I think there may be a draw in there somewhere. If anything, India might nab the last Test in Sydney. They do have a pretty good record in Sydney. 3-0, maybe 3-1.
Yeah, I can see that happening. I'm going to say 2-1 with a draw. I could see them probably winning the last Test, India, but I think this first Test could end up as a draw, maybe. Especially with Clark out, who's known to be a very aggressive captain. I think we could see maybe a bit less tactically from either Haddon or Smith or whoever ends up being captain. So I think it could be a 2-1.
Yeah, and in terms of the Indian teams that have toured in the past, to think that Ravi Ashwin is your main spinner for this series is probably a little bit worrying by Indian standards. Of course, they've had so many amazing spinners over the last 15 to 20 years. Guys like Singh and Kumble have been quite pivotal in the way they play cricket. So, again, it might be a little bit underdone in terms of the spinning ranks, but they do have the quicks to produce something special in Australia with very quick, friendly pitches. So we'll have to see how it pans out, but it's going to be interesting. Finally, a bit of news out of the New Zealand setup with Daniel Vettori being recalled for their next Test against Pakistan, which actually starts today in Sharjah. It's his first Test since July 2012, and it looks as though New Zealand are going to pick a spin trio in Craig, Sodhi, and the 35-year-old. Luke, it's really a surprise selection. What did you make of that?
It is absolutely a surprise selection for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, Vettori himself had actually retired from Test cricket. I mean, no one thought he was going to come back. And probably number two, because they're playing 3 spinners, which is, not seen a lot, I think it's fair to say. But they do have 3 very good spinners, especially with Vettori there. So that's quite interesting to me. I also was a bit surprised because he is 35 years old, and I don't think at this stage of his career, with the injuries he's suffered, he probably adds a lot more to that side at the moment.
Well, he's even said himself that fitness-wise, he really doubts himself playing over 5 days, which is worrying in itself because, in Test cricket, you have to be alert and ready for 5 days of cricket. Sodhi's really impressed me as a leg spinner. He's actually been probably the most troubling bowler over there in the United Arab Emirates. Craig has also been quite a decent addition as well. It's going to be interesting to see if they pick Southey or Trent Boult, of course. Again, quite capable quicks, but in the situation, in the conditions of UAE, it's very difficult to get any life out of the wicket. They have shown positive signs. They've actually done something that Australia couldn't do, was manage to sneak a draw in one of the Test matches thanks to some decent batting. Do you see New Zealand somehow making a miraculous victory in this game and ending the series at 1-1?
I would be very surprised. I think they are a side that sort of is very up and down. They lack a lot of leadership. I mean, that could be another reason for Vettori's inclusion. He's a good leader, especially for a lot of those young players from the New Zealand side. They could sneak a draw or a win maybe, but I would be unlikely to bet in New Zealand's favour, I don't think.
It's really doubtful that they take 20 wickets against that Pakistani side who just seem to chalk up the runs for fun over there. We'd really like to see teams like New Zealand and even the struggling West Indies to produce some good cricket just to increase the parity, I guess, in world cricket once more. It's quite uninspiring to see a team like the West Indies struggle, and New Zealand could easily fall down that track if they don't get their stuff together soon. Though they do have a good intake of good young players at the moment, so I think it's time to be positive about that New Zealand side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, they are a very young side at the moment, and they on their day they have a few really good quicks, a couple of really decent spinners. And I mean, obviously, Vettori is there at the moment, but he won't be around for long. And they've got a few decent batsmen there as well. So, I mean, they've got a good future, I think.
Ross Taylor always holds the key in that batting order, but it's good to see guys like Williamson get in the act, and Tom Latham scored an excellent 100 in the second test. Couldn't quite back it up in the second innings. And, of course, Ross Taylor scored 105 in the second innings. So you have to say things are probably looking up for New Zealand cricket.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're a side that's definitely on the up. They've got a lot of young players. I think Latham there's only 22 years old, so he should have a good future in the game. And hopefully they can get it together, because we do like to see our boys from across the ditch go well.
Yeah, we don't hate them, contrary to popular belief. I do rate the Kiwi setup, and to be honest, I think they're probably dark horses to nab something in the World Cup, given that they're co-hosts.
Yeah, definitely. They're a side that could go well in the World Cup, because they're quite an explosive side, and I think that's important. You've got to have a couple of game winners, which they do in Ross Taylor. I mean, he's a really, really good player. So, and of course Vettori. So, I think they could pull up a few trees in the World Cup. Absolutely.
Jesse Ryder too, also coming into a bit of form. And one-day cricket is a strength of New Zealand's. They've always tailored sort of players to be guys who can contribute with both bat and ball. So whatever they do in the World Cup, they've got flexibility in their decisions, and if anything goes pear-shaped, they're going to be good to sort of amend things. We've run out of time, Luke Ward. Thanks for joining me here today.
That's all right, mate. No problem. Glad I could make it.
Once again, thanks again for joining us here at Over the Line Sports. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Over the Lines AUS. Make sure to find us and like us on Facebook, and subscribe to the video podcast here on YouTube. Until next time, see you later.